This is apropos. Taipei drew to a brief standstill earlier when air raid sirens forced residents off the streets and into underground shelters as part of Taiwan's annual civilian drills aimed at preparing the self-governed island for a potential Chinese invasion. It comes as regional tensions increase and amid doubts as to how the US might respond in the event of an attack. Monty Francis has the details.
Sirens rang out across Taipei on Thursday, and across the Taiwanese capital, the urgency seemed very real. With mass evacuations underway and first responders jumping to action, even harmless smoke poured out of this telecom building to simulate a drone attack. But in truth, it was all part of an annual drill to prepare the Taiwanese people for the potential of an attack by China. Taiwan's president, who took office last year, has been labeled by Beijing as a separatist, and he was on hand to explain why the drills were necessary.
Threats from authoritarianism have never stopped. From military intimidation to internal infiltration and political warfare, all of this happens on a daily basis. Under such circumstances, we can only be prepared.
Modern China has never ruled Taiwan, but claims the island as its own. Chinese President Xi Jinping has threatened to annex Taiwan by force, stepping up incursions by China's military in Taiwan's defense zone. Some residents of the Taiwanese capital said the drills drive home the real potential of a Chinese attack.
The exercises make everyone more vigilant, and they raise the public's awareness. By conducting drills in advance, when the real enemy comes or missiles arrive, we can quickly find places to take cover.
But not everyone was convinced.
I feel that the exercises probably won't be much help. If a war really breaks out in Taiwan, the first thing to be destroyed would definitely be the most basic infrastructure, like power plants. Once those are taken out, Taiwan would almost certainly collapse.
The drills happened in conjunction with 10 days of military exercises in Taiwan, which end on Friday.
To discuss the weather implications, we're joined now by international relations analyst Alessio Patalano, professor in East Asian warfare and strategy at King's College London. Thanks so much for being with us on the programme. These civilian drills, they happen in Taiwan each year. We heard a little bit about what they're aimed at in that report. Tell us, is the risk of a Chinese attack becoming more real for people there?
The increase in military activities around Taiwan certainly has brought to the center of world attention something that over the last 3 to 4 years had become particularly clear in Taiwan. And that is that from the perspective of mainland, no option is off the table in principle. Therefore, the risk of different type of military action for coercion or indeed different forms of attack are considered to be a real possibility. In that sense, since 2023, we've seen that the annual military summer exercises, the Hanguan exercise, has now evolved, changed to reflect that tension, to reflect that risk, and above all, hone in the idea that whatever defenses might be required from different type of military action will have to see the Taiwanese population at the neuralgic center of it. And therefore, the civilian component of this absolutely essential, not because an attack is imminent, but because of the importance of the psychological and cognitive preparation of society as a whole in case of different types of military actions were to actually be taken against the island.
And what are Taiwan's biggest vulnerabilities, do you believe?
Well, first and foremost, we're talking about a very considerable military differential. So in that sense, the capabilities that China has at its disposal placed towards and facing Taiwan are rather overwhelming, whether it is long-range precision strike, whether it is the ability to isolate Taiwan as an island from external communication. So you have different type of layers that present a variety of challenges. But at the same time, we have to be cognizant of the fact that Chinese political warfare, so actions to, if you want, weaken the social fabric of Taiwan and make the idea of a return home, as the Chinese presented, as inevitable, is just at the heart of this question as much as military capabilities.
Yeah, and Taiwan, it imports the vast majority of its energy, for example, most of it arriving by sea, Alessio. So could China simply debilitate the island by blocking these ships? It has, I believe, carried out drills with that in mind previously.
I think you're making a very important point, which I think we can roughly sort of expanded to the entire Taiwanese economy in principle, because Taiwan is not just about the energy imports, but also any exports, any other major imports to make the island's economic solvency continue to exist depend on maritime access. So from that respect, we've seen over the last couple of years in particular, a considerable increase of Chinese law enforcement activities to simulate the possibility to impose some sort of a quarantine that de facto would translate into Beijing seizing a considerable amount of control over what gets in and out of Taiwan. Having said so, there is a flip side of that coin, because Taiwan is also one of the core neurologic centers of international economic output, microchips being a key element in this story. And therefore, any considerable or significant impact on the ability of the Taiwanese economy to remain solvent would not just stay to Taiwan. It would have inevitable impacts way beyond the boundaries of the island.
And the government, they're also expecting that Taiwan will need, you know, more kind of electricity, more resources to support the demand in AI infrastructure as well. So bearing all of that in mind, what kind of impact could any kind of move to blockade the island have on the global economy?
Well, it depends very much how it is enacted. If it is tailored to limit the, if the neurologic center remains the Taiwanese population, then you would probably want to have it at the beginning as a very selective action aimed at weakening a perception in Taiwan that food security is at stake, that the ability to continue to run electricity around different major cities would remain intact and sustainable. That would probably have a more limited effect. And as we've seen with other crises, from the grain in the Black Sea to the goods through the Red Sea, wider international impact, you start seeing the consequences of it only a few weeks after that. So here the key question is, will the Taiwanese start to build up an element of resilience such as they can hold out for the necessary amount of time that would make the impact perceived as an international question and therefore prompt wider responses to it?
Yeah, and when it comes to the international question, all of this is happening when there are question marks being raised over how much support or what kind of policy Donald Trump might follow in the event that, you know, China were to make some move on the island.
That's a very good question. And at the moment, of course, we have to try to understand what is the difference between Donald Trump dealing with international crisis in places like Ukraine or in the Middle East, as opposed to the type of Trump administration that would show up and deal with a potential crisis across the Strait of Taiwan. We've seen that there are pretty entrenched lines when it comes to the tension in terms of tariffs and trade between China and the United States. And we're certainly hearing a consistent noise coming out of the Defense Department, the State Department, as well as the combatant commands like Indo-PACOM, to suggest that there is a clear sense that in case of a major crisis of Taiwan, clearly, depending on how it sort of manifests itself, the Trump administration would have a relatively robust response to China. So we should assume that the type of Trump administration that we would see materializing in the case of a crisis around Taiwan would probably be different from the one that we've seen, especially in dealings with Russian full-scale invasions in Ukraine.
So, Alessio, when it comes to these drills that Taiwan is carrying out, are they also then about showing the rest of the world essentially that Taipei is serious about boosting its defence capabilities, that it is in fact able to defend itself?
I think you're absolutely right. This is a very important point. It has it has three fronts. One, communicating to Beijing that Taiwan is getting really serious about its own defenses, and any attempt at a lightning, attempt at taking over the islands would be met with severe resistance. That changes the game, is meant to change the game and the calculus in Beijing. But at the same time, there are other important audiences, the domestic audience in Taiwan, to convince them that that is possible, as well as an international audience. And here, first and foremost, the United States, to show the United States that Taiwan is committed to its own defense as a down payment for any expectation of support from the United States, as well as everybody else, to draw a light and attention to what is happening across the strait. So you are absolutely right. This is a multi-front, if you want, a set of objectives that revolve around this military exercise, not just the preparation, defense of the risk of a potential attack.
And Alessio, just finally, what kind of US-made military systems are actually integrated into these drills, and what kind of role do they play?
So we know that at the beginning of the exercises, HIMARS were integrated into a part of the exercise. These are the type of batteries, missile batteries that are designed to intercept long-range position strike attacks. And that's obviously going to be a really important piece of the multi-layered defense system that Taiwan is putting in place, because these are going to be essential to contest the airspace in any major crisis. And the contested airspace, it's a space in which no one, not even an overwhelming Chinese force, could possibly feel safe.
Alessio, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for being with us, though. That is Alessio Patalano, Professor in East Asian Warfare and Strategy at King's College London. Thanks so much.